All the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Looking for a new home or that special place to spend your retirement? Century 21 Realty Management has the place for you. Ladera Towers Condominium in Manila. Luxury living you deserve. Amenities like a gourmet kitchen, a large jacuzzi tub, private lanai with a magnificent ocean view, and 24/7 security. Other amenities, large swimming pool, couple of tennis courts, 3-bedroom condo units are available right now. This is an opportunity you should look at now before they're all gone. Call us now at Century 21 Realty Management, 647-5003, or visit the website, LaderaTowerGuam.com or GuamProperties.com.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
Regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Jose, have you turned on Facebook? Yeah. Did you turn it on in my set? Here I am again. Yeah, okay. There it's popped up finally. And, of course, we've got tailgaters there already. We got Jose Ted Pago and Rico Blancaflor have already signed in to Tall Tales Facebook. Good going, guys. All right. We've done the Second Amendment. The next thing I need to talk about is making Guam great again. You'll recall that a couple of days ago, I spent some time with Robert Underwood's latest column where he talked about the Proud Boys. And we're still working on some illustration of what Proud Boys are like. Because Robert said maybe we don't have Proud Boys here on Guam, but we have Proud Boy wannabes. And the best that Jose and I could figure out was that a wannabe must be a cross between a wallaby from Australia and a manatee from Florida. So we're working on some illustrations for that. In the meantime, back to Robert's column. Of course, Robert is stricken with almost terminal TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. And he said that these Proud Boy wannabes here on the island are talking about make Guam great again. And when Robert's column popped up, a friend wrote to me and said, Bob, it looks like he's talking about you. And some of the things that Robert thought were, highly problematic are indeed things I do talk about here on the show. So when I got that email, I wrote back and I said, boy, I damn sure hope so. I sure hope he's talking about me. And I decided that every day I would talk about the things that I'm doing to make Guam great again. We're doing pretty well up until the current governor got elected to office, who started out being named Lulian Guerrero and quickly morphed into the Red Queen from Alice in Wonderland. So that when anyone would criticize her, her standard response was, off with their heads. And the power went to her head. She shut the whole island down for quite some time, set up checkpoints on the highway, on and on and on, made folks like Huey Long and Mussolini look like populists by comparison. So I'm working on a list. Every day I add something new to the list. So first item on my list was combat governmental identity politics. And if you want to know what identity politics is like, tune into the show on Monday right after the big halftime show. You'll see Hope Cristobal's screen test. I think Hope Cristobal defines identity politics to the point that I couldn't even hope to add anything to it. And then second on my list is I want to advocate an efficient, effective government operating within the rule of law that provides basic government services on at least a break-even basis. So when our governor says, we popped up the GRT to 5% from 4% to counteract the ill effects of the President Trump tax cuts. Now, the worst thing you could do to any jurisdiction is cut taxes, right? This one, that's probably true. So we increased the GRT temporarily, and temporarily here on Guam has a way of lasting forever.
Forever!
Yeah, that's how long the governor wants that 5% GRT to stay in place. Now, the naysayers will say, well, even if we drop the GRT back to 4%, merchants wouldn't lower their prices, so why bother? And the reason is that the more money circulating in private hands, the more vigorous the economy tends to be. The more money in government hands, the less vigorous the government tends to be, the economy tends to be. So the way to a healthy, vibrant economy is to lower taxes to the point where you are providing an efficient, effective government operating within the rule of law that provides basic government services without borrowing. That's the key, because people in the private sector that have money will invest it. They'll invest it in capital goods. They'll increase production and prosperity for the whole island. Number 3 on my list is I'm backing the stationing of Marines on the island. Of all of the things that have happened to us in the last several years, I think moving Marines from Okinawa to Guam is one of the very best. Of course, I'm a little bit biased. I test positive for the once a Marine, always a Marine virus, and I'm proud to say that. But we'll bring in 4,000 new wallets to the island, all of which with fresh green stuff coming from the United States to spend here on our island. Will enhance our role as being right here on the forward edge of the battle when it comes to defending our country, the United States of America. We are the front lines out here, and we need to let the folks in the 50 states know that and remember it when they're dealing with our island. Fourth thing on my list is I'm going to champion free speech. I'm going to continue it. I'm going to continue pounding on the table. And I'm going to pound on people who don't champion free speech. Did I mention Thomas Kreis, the president of the university?
Yeah, you just have, and that's why number 4 is probably here.
Exactly. Now, I'm going to beat up on Thomas Kreis when we get to that item on the card, but I did hear someone say something favorable about him today.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Somebody said, Bob, you should take it easy on Tom Kreis. He's the best principal the university's ever had.
You're wanted in the office, Bob?
Yeah. Ron McNinch, please report to the office. Yeah. Okay, so then next on the agenda here, of course, is Demi Cudney. I can't remember, Jose. Did I read the Candid editorial yesterday, didn't I?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought I did. Okay, let's pick up with the Daily News editorial. This is another really hard-hitted one. Remember yesterday, the Daily News actually wrote a real editorial about firearms, but they made the tragic mistake of, appealing to the left by talking about banning assault weapons. when it's pretty clear to me that they, like everybody else on the left, doesn't know an assault weapon from a pea shooter. But that doesn't stop them from jabbering. Here's today's hard-hitting. Oh, wait a minute. This is yesterday's. I guess I pushed the wrong button. Well, let me go online and get today's Daily News editorial. Yeah, I forgot to bring yesterday, so I guess I made up for it by bringing it in today. It'll just take me a second here to dial it up on the internet. You know, I was wondering, certain kinds of information has to be published in a newspaper of general circulation. You know, notices for various court proceedings, probates, etc., have to be published in a newspaper of general circulation. I wonder if the Daily News is still a newspaper of general circulation when they don't put out either a hard copy or an e-edition on Saturday and Sunday. I got to look that up for tomorrow.
That's right. Nothing Saturday and Sunday. That was interesting because they just said no physical publication.
Yeah. And then they do sort of an online, but it's mostly just a rehash of what they ran before. Yeah, here it is. Our view: attend Joint Region Mariana's open house event at Guam Cultural Depository. Change has been a constant in Guam in the months and years and won't be any different as our nation's armed forces move full speed ahead with the relocation of thousands of U.S. military personnel from Okinawa. They'll be making their home at Marine Corps Base Camp Bloss and other areas and military installations throughout the island. There are many reasons for the move, not the least of which are growing geopolitical tensions in the Asia-Pacific region. But while our federal counterparts gear up for this costly relocation, the people of Guam must be mindful to participate in events hosted by our military partners. The changes occurring right now won't just affect the military, as these changes could have untold consequences and significant effects on our people, land, and natural resources well into the future. This is why we encourage all members of our community across all sectors, young and old, to make time for the open house event at the University of Guam's Cultural Repository Center, which will be hosted by officials from Joint Region Marianas, including Rear Admiral Benjamin Nicholson. In consultation with the government, quote, in consultation with the government of Guam, this event is being held in response to the expressed community interest in learning more about DoD efforts to preserve cultural resources on Guam. A news release from Joint Region Marianas stated, "We take our responsibility to the preservation of cultural resources seriously," JRM Commander Rear Admiral Benjamin Nicholson stated in the news release. "We are excited about the opportunity to share information and engage in productive dialogue with our community partners and members of the public. Attend the event scheduled from 5 to 7 on Thursday at the new Guam Cultural Repository at the university to learn more about cultural resource preservation work being performed to prepare for the Marine Corps relocation to Guam. We urge all our cultural preservation advocates and those concerned about the military buildup's effects on the island to attend to bring your comments, questions, and concerns to the table." Yeah, now I have a nasty feeling that I know who's going to be bringing their concerns to the table. And
is this a forum?
Well, it doesn't. That's not my understanding. It's a kind of a show and tell. Here it is. This is what we got. Walk around, take a peek, grab a selfie or two, some shake and howdy with Admiral Nicholson probably. But you know, given the likes of the separatists and the anti-war senator named Sabina Paris, we'll just have to be kind of engaging in watchful waiting here, Jose. I'd sure like to attend, but I'd really have to beat feet to get out there after the show, wouldn't I? And I probably couldn't wear my work uniform either.
The I'm a Tailgater T-shirt.
Yeah.
It'd actually be appropriate.
It would. Well, maybe I will go then. Anything that promotes the show can't be all bad. Maybe I will go. Good idea. Okay, so let's take a peek at the card. We start out with systemic racism. And then the first item on the card is Frenchie versus Bavacqua. Frenchie's a real tailgater. You know, even he's in La France, he still thinks about Tall Tales. He calls in, he posts. He's a contributor to Jungle Watch, etc. Next item on the card is a Representative Lee, House of Representatives, versus Hope Cristobal.
It's neck and neck.
Yeah, it is. It's close. And then we've got Christ versus McNinch. Now, you recall that Christ McNinched McNinch. And the Board of Regents continued the McNinching, as related to us yesterday by Ron McNinch. And we've got Chris versus the governor. We've got double pay versus you. You know that dead horse called "We didn't get our double pay when we had to work during the emergency." And there are a couple of guys out there with a stick still beating on that dead horse. And then
Did they test that horse for COVID?
Probably. Yeah, I think the horse died of COVID, right? Yeah. Yeah. The ACLU versus won't. We've got won't versus sobriety. And then maybe that's as far as I'll get today. We'll just have to see how it goes. Okay, once again, we've got systemic racism. I gave you kind of the long version of what it's all about yesterday. I cited to Michael Bavacqua and his chops as a historian, where he went and looked at an article by Don Rubenstein, cherry-picked it, and found an article that said that Chamorro women had engaged in abortion, omitting or forgetting to read the whole article, which Tim Rohr did, which thoroughly impeached the credibility of Michael Bavacqua. And Tim dug a pretty good hole, which Bavacqua fell into. Now, if you go to Jungle Watch, there's room on Jungle Watch for comments. And our tailgater friend Frenchie commented, and if Tim dug a hole, Frenchie dug something that looked like the channel tunnel for Bavacqua. It's a pretty good item on the card. So that's enough for systemic racism today. I'll go straight to Frenchie. And you'll recall that yesterday we went into this where Bavacqua, said that the Chamorro women, matrilineal society, control over their own bodies, even during Spanish times, we're doing abortions, etc. And I got this from Don Rubenstein's work. And then Tim comes back and said, yeah, you should have read a little bit farther, because you'll find that the abortions that were committed were not women's taking charge of their own body. It was women committing infanticide because they couldn't bear up under the yoke of Spanish occupation. I don't condone either, but that's a hell of a difference. And of course, what Bavacqua did was he filed a declaration under penalty of perjury in the chemical abortion case here on the island, which means he swore that what he said was the truth. Well, it was a little bit of the truth, but, I suppose if he were a layperson, you could kind of shrug your shoulders and say, well, he's trying to make his argument. But he says he's a historian. Historians don't cherry pick and present the information that they find that's favorable to their own dogma. They've got to cover it all. Now, what Bavacqua could have surfaced what Rubenstein said and then rebutted it, that would have been fair. But just to state one side and not mention the other, in my mind, that takes Bavacqua out of the category of historian if he were ever there in the first place. Now here's what Frenchie said on Jungle Watch. Bavakwa has two major problems. One, he lacks intellectual honesty because he's willing to argue any which way to further his narrow and flawed sense of history and his revisionist understanding of said history. Two, his lack of deep research on issues of ethnology, civilizations, and again history makes him conclude wrongly on the reasons of certain events. Not surprising, since this is not his background of studies. In the history of the world, it has been underlined that societies living in highly challenging environment, mostly desert settings, tend to be matriarchal. Within these very few matriarchal societies, like the Tuaregs of the Sahara, the Tubus of Tibet, or to a lesser extent the Bushmen of the Kalahari, it has been established that the lack of food and liquid resources has led these tribes to regulate the number of births in the tribe according to the annual living conditions. That's exactly what Klaus Schwab and his gang want to do, Jose. These are exceptional conditions when it cannot be superimposed to other civilizations and or situations. Rubinstein never equated these known examples of population control to the situation in Marianas, which were very different. The situation facing Chamorros then are more in line with the Aborigines on larger islands like Taiwan, which also faced a brutal military colonization and a subsequent subjugation. In this case, it was noted the same high ratio of suicide and infanticide as a form of refusal of their loss, rather than a matriarchal, enlightened approach to population control. Bavakwa is here again being petulant and dishonest. Bavakwa's tactic of trying to fit a political argument to an historical narrative is not new, but it is certainly reprehensible. Yeah. So there you go, Michael Bavakwa, and your scholarship. Okay, next item on the card is Representative Lee. That's Representative Sheila Jackson Lee. Guess which party she's from? We'll take a short break and come back to Sheila Jackson Lee.
Join us at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and see why they've been crowned Guam's best Chamorro food restaurant for 9 consecutive years. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tinactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet burgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña location from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for lunch, 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. for dinner, or 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. for their famous Sunday brunch.
All 3 stations, all 3 morning shows. Thanks to all the listeners for Pika's Best, Choice Broadcasting has swept the top 3 best radio stations. The Point, Boss 104, and Star 101. Top 3 radio personalities, Kyle Mandapat, Ray Gibson, and Daryl Lizava. Put the power of Pika's Best to work for you. If you're an advertiser, call 671-888-7346 for information, rates, and packages. And let us get your message out to Pika's Best listeners with Pika's Best broadcasters. And thanks for listening to Pika's Best.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, so here we are again. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee versus Hope Cristobal. And this is an article that ran in Red Star, as you were Red State. And here it goes. It may be MLK Day, but Democrats aren't here for all that content of character stuff. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, long in the running for being the vapidest member of Congress, has introduced legislation that could make political criticism by white people against minorities a federal crime. Well, Jose, what else can we do?
Short of muffling our mouths.
Yeah. And what can only be called a convoluted mess. The bill proposes that a white person who vilifies any non-white person and has their words end up on social media accessible by, quote, persons who are predisposed to engaging in any action in furtherance of white supremacy-inspired hate crime would themselves be committing a federal crime. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, and then here's some posts here, has introduced a House bill to criminalize conspiracy to commit white supremacy, which includes any criticism of non-white people who that influences, such as something published online, someone who commits a hate crime. And there's a little bit of the bill here. Let's see. This act may be cited as Leading Against White Supremacy Act of 2023. That's the name of the bill. Section 2, White Supremacy-Inspired Crime. At least one of whom engaged in the planning, development, preparation, or perpetration of white supremacy-inspired hate crime, and at least one of whom published material advancing white supremacy ideology, antagonism based on replacement theory, or hate speech that vilifies or otherwise directed against any non-white person or group, and such material crime. The provision is so broad that you could drive a Mack truck through it. What is a white supremacy-inspired crime under this statute? How is right replacement theory defined? Because Democrats call replacement theory as a way to silence Republicans is not replacement theory at all, but is just a reiteration of Democrat and admitted aims to use immigration to influence elections. Further, the use of "or" in Section B is important because it leaves vilifies as a standalone qualifier. What is the limiting principle there? If a post on social media that Sheila Jackson Lee is an incredibly ignorant, abusive person who has a long history of training her staff like dirt, does that mean I vilified her under this proposed law? It would certainly seem so. Then there is the company angle, conspiracy angle to deal with. It does not appear that there's actually any requirement that two or more persons targeted under the statute have any real connection to one another. If someone commits a white supremacy-inspired hate crime against a person, and I've likewise been politically criticizing that same person on social media, even justifiably, I would now committed a federal crime myself. This law, if it were to pass, would be used to quash valid political criticism against any non-white person or group, the BLM organization, for example, because such criticism could leave those levying it liable to federal charges. Forgetting that such would be a blatant breach of the First Amendment, it also exposes a wild totalitarian desire by Lee and those who think like her. And that's exactly why Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy should put it up to a vote. Put this ridiculous, reductive garbage on the floor and make every Democrat go on record. That's a great idea. Same thing they did with Olivia Ocasio-Cortez and her Green New Deal. Remember, Mitch McConnell put it on the floor of the Senate, and she objected. How dare you? You can't do that.
I'm supposed to explain myself?
Yeah. Now, this article touches on a really interesting subject, but I'm afraid Bocce, who wrote it, kind of missed the point. The point here is not how crappily the statute is written. That's not the point. I mean the bill. The point is that the bill is written at all to criminalize white people for criticizing people who are not white and making that a crime if you put it on the internet shows that Sheila Jackson Lee should go back to kindergarten or sandbox. She had no business being in. I don't care how hateful she is. This is just not the kind of thing that the United States Congress ought to be dealing with. So I agree with Bonchi here. Let's put it on the agenda, and let's have a roll call vote, and let's see how the Democrats vote on this. Now, of course, you know that if this were on the agenda, any Democrat who votes against it obviously is a racist, because anyone who would oppose what Sheila Jackson Lee is doing here, like on the card for today, I get down to Rick Moran versus Pete Butt. Now, Pete Butt is not a person of color, but when I get to that article, you'll see that the only reason that Pete Butt never got fired is, guess why, Jose?
Why?
Because he's queer.
That's right.
If he were straight, he'd have been on
Nobody
there.
criticized his absences.
Yeah, you cannot do that.
And I'm not just talking about his quote-unquote maternity leave. I'm talking about just him being in office. I mean, the whole transportation thing that's going on right now, not a peep from him.
No.
Nothing.
Because he doesn't know anything about it, He was the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, once upon a time. South Bend's got roads. Okay, so much
system. That's what it is.
Yeah, so much for Sheila Jackson Lee. I'm going to be on the lookout for this name in the future because she really understands what it's all about. What race relations are all about. Next, we've got Christ versus McNinch. And once again, I heard somebody compliment President Tom Christ today, saying, you shouldn't criticize him, Bob. He's the best principal that the University of Guam has ever had. So this is a pretty good article that Troy ran today, and it's called "Where UOG, Where Political Free Speech Goes to Die on a Brown-Stained Nose." The University of Guam is punishing a professor for criticizing Governor Leon Guerrero. Ron McNinch, a political science expert and member of UOG's public administration faculty, is fighting back and accusing UOG President Thomas Christ of an age-old UOG practice, violating the free speech rights of members of the university community. On October 24, McNinch sent an email to his students and copied the media to show solidarity with the students. The students had spent months coordinating the quadrennial Great Debates, a UOG tradition and public service to the voters of Guam since the gubernatorial election of 1994. It was historically the final date before the general election. That is, until Governor Leon Guerrero's campaign pulled out of the event and President Christ pulled the plug on it. McNinch, in response to the Leon Guerrero campaign and Christ, wrote to his students, quote, "Thank you so much for your efforts and the $20,000 you raised for car washes and research projects to fund the Great Debate. This is a major production. Do not fear. As chair of public administration and legal studies, the Great Debate will occur, and I, as chair or other faculty members in our division, will argue with appropriate zealousness the side or sides that do not appear. The voters of Guam deserve to have issues debated and argued. I can stand in for Felix Camacho or Leon Guerrero. I will. I debate very well. Whoever does not show up will not win this election. It's just that simple. This is political calculus everyone can understand. This is reality. Let everyone else play politics. The great debate will go on. Do not play with the University of Guam and our students. Sincerely, Ron McNinch. P.S. May the team with the most votes win. If you don't show up, you won't win. That's the letter that McNinch sent to his students.
That's the one that got him the reprimand.
Yeah. Now, it seems to me that, it's kind of like if you watch college basketball, sometimes a basketball coach will draw a technical foul to inspire his team. Seems like he's down. The coach jumps off the bench, does something kind of outrageous. The referee calls a technical foul on the coach, and it sometimes enlivens the spirit of his players. So what McNinch is doing here is he's saying, hey, look, guys, I'm sticking up for the team here. And if I got to go in there and pretend that I'm the governor, practice up saying, forever, I will fill her role, because they really should be here. They're letting you down.
Forever!
Yeah. So I guess that's where the brown nose comes in, because the speculation is that this did not sit very well with the governor, her campaign chairman, a certain Rory Respicio, the the chair of the Democrat Party, a gentleman by the name of Tony Babauta, he of the 19th floor. So, I can only speculate. I can imagine. I have no information that the phone line must have been buzzing. Are you going to let this employee of yours badmouth your governor? Well, gosh, Governor, let me see what I can do. Yeah. So that's what happened. Now, I have the letter that Christ wrote to McNinch, and it's labeled on top confidential. But McNinch, the first thing he did was he waived confidentiality. Let's open this up to everybody. And it goes like this. Dear Dr. McNinch, it's the subject, notice of alleged inappropriate behavior.
Oh, behavior?
Behavior.
Oh, that's different.
It is. Behavior. I had this is my mental image. McNinch went to the dining with the cafeteria, university cafeteria, and in the middle of his meal, he belched and didn't say, excuse me. He used his knife to eat his peas with. He wiped his lips with his sleeve instead of a net. Inappropriate behavior.
Dipped his french fries in mayonnaise.
Inappropriate behavior. Pretty serious for a university professor. Yeah, we can't let that stuff go. Pursuant to Article XB of the negotiated agreement between the Regents and the university and the UOG faculty union, you are hereby on notice that on or about October 24, I received information that you sent the email attached here to as Exhibit A to the public media, and that you said you sent the email attached as B advising various UOG administrators to stay out of this election. The email attached herein as Exhibit A may violate Article 7B of UG's rules and regulations, etc., which states that official news releases and advertisements shall be distributed to the public media through the Public Relations Office of the President upon request of the dean, director, faculty, blah, 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 blah. Well, this was not an official. If you start out with this, you've missed the entire point of free speech. Free speech means that you, not the university, can go out and talk about matters of public concern that relate to the university. And this is not a news release. It absolutely should not be a news release. Okay, so we start out on the wrong, the commander of troops says, forward march. And Christ steps off on his right foot and wonders why he's out of step for the rest of the march. The email may also violate article blah, 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 because of statements like, whoever does not show up will not win this election. It's a matter of opinion. If you don't show up, you won't, and don't play with the University of Guam, and our students may be perceived as being insulting or belligerent. Well, that's the whole point
of the First Amendment,
of freedom of speech. If you can't be insulting or belligerent, then it doesn't count for anything. If you can only say things that give people a warm tummy, then forget about free speech. But that's why I say the best principal that the university ever had, he doesn't want faculty members to talk to parents and be insulting or belligerent. That might be okay, for a grade school principal, but this is a university. The attachment Exhibit B may violate another article which prohibits political activity in contravention of Guam's Mini-Hatch Act, which is a section of etc., which prohibits UOG employees from using their official authority or influence for the purpose of interfering or affecting the result of an election, because the email appears to indicate you are trying to influence whether administrators or faculty members would vote and influence them for voting for some other political candidates for Guam's. Boy, you really got to be a great reader to read that into what McNinch said. Yeah.
None of that take is what he's describing.
No. In accordance with article blah, 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 I have scheduled a meeting between you and me at my office at 2 on Monday, October 31, to discuss the aforementioned emails, wherein you may explain your perspective of them. In accordance with article blah, 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 you have the right to a representative. A copy of this notice will be sent to the union president, etc., etc. Sincerely, Thomas W. Kreis, Ph.D. So that's a statement of charges. Now, and McNinch yesterday kind of laid out the whole kangaroo court aspect of this, but if we were talking about a judicial procedure and this were the complaint, opposing counsel files a motion to dismiss, goes through the same analysis that I went, motion granted. That would be the way it would go. All right. So going back to the article here, 2 days later, Kreis wrote McNinch a notice of alleged inappropriate behavior, stating McNinch's email to students, etc., may have violated the rules, etc. This would not be the first time the university punished its faculty and students for speaking out. Former President Robert Underwood dragged McNinch through a disciplinary process for blowing the whistle on a conspiracy by faculty of the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences to cover up an illegal sex scandal by one of their colleagues. The professor eventually was tried and convicted by a jury of sex crimes. You remember that, Jose? At a party at his house, the professor did. But not before the convicted felon supporters, who still remain leaders at UOG, tried in vain to silence McNinch and the students who came forward with bravery to stop the professor from having any more power over young women in his classes. Now this, they should have given McNinch a medal. This is back in the Me Too era. Believe a woman, etc. Believe a woman unless it's McNinch. and then we don't believe the woman, we McNinch the whistleblower. McNinch fought the trumped-up charges against him, which are eerily similar to the current charges by Christ. The university illegally hired outside counsel, using hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxpayers' funds to represent itself in federal court. UOG was forced to settle the case, and despite Guam law dictating disclosure of such financials, the university moved for its sealing. McNinch has been in the midst of forcing UOG to comply with Guam law when Christ disciplined him on essentially the same charges, violating UOG rules by speaking out publicly on a matter of political interest. The professor appealed the discipline to the Board of Regents, which heard the case yesterday afternoon, Jose. And then I've got an article from the Daily News on the Regents, and I got one from KOAM, and there are a couple of nuggets in each one. An official reprimand over election-related emails will remain in University of Guam professors Ron McNinch's file, and the university will move to update its email policies in response. UOG Regents on Tuesday unanimously denied a request from McNinch. Not unanimous, because according to McNinch, and don't count on the newspaper, well, it was only just the student regent, so it's not important. But that's actually one of the most important items of this story, that there's one regent there who is an adult and had been McNinch's student, who has all the rights and privileges of any other regents, and the regent said, you can't sit in this proceeding.
She was soft McNinched.
She was soft McNinched, yeah. Now, play that out a little bit. Let's say that they had some real procedures, and they'd actually conducted something like a tribunal, provided a minimal amount of due process to McNinch, and afterwards actually deliberated. Instead of, I think the chairman of the Board of Regents said, okay, it's time to make a decision. Anybody bring the rubber stamp? Because had they deliberated, that one person, if you ever saw the movie 12 Angry Men, a great movie, 11,
great play, yeah.
Yeah, 11 people were ready to take the kid out and hang him from a sour apple tree. But one angry guy, Henry Fonda, kept at it until finally the jury brought in a not guilty verdict, which, from watching the movie, was the correct verdict. So, we had 9 angry men there, and they kicked the only one out that might have been a justice-oriented, a free-thinker who might have said something favorable about McNinch. And the reason that we have multi-member tribunals that's the very reason that people may go into a tribunal having kind of decided which way they want to go. If I'm on jury duty, sorry folks, but I don't like criminals. You sit through a whole jury trial, you hear all the evidence, you hear counsel, you listen to the jury instructions. I'm really not that much in favor, but this guy didn't do what they've accused him of. I'm not going to vote for guilty. That could have happened, but it couldn't happen if they kicked the student member out. And the fact that they kicked her out speaks just as loud as the BS that they used to identify the decision or non-decision that they made. They weren't interested in discussing this. They were just interested in McNinching Ron McNinch.
Is the correct terminology to describe this group of people hubris, that they can make a decision like this in full public view and think that nobody's going to say anything?
I think so. Yeah.
Guess what?
Yeah. But you know what the Greeks tell you usually follows hubris? Chaos.
Yep.
Yeah. And
we have it right here.
And that's what they signed up for. The UOG's Board of Regents on Tuesday unanimously denied a request from McNinch to have the reprimand issued by Christ struck from his record. The professor has denied any violation and called a reprimand a violation of his freedom of speech and his right to speak to the media under the UOG faculty union contract. Specific violations will be struck from his reprimand letter, but will be amended to state that it was issued over unrefined and diplomatic emails. Okay, so they're punishing him. Now, they first of all, how do they get authority to change the president's letter? You know, they could issue a decision of their own, but I don't think they have the ability to say, can you, President Christ, can you send us your letter in the form of a Word document? Is we got some copy, cut and paste to do, and then we'll send it back to you, and you can sign it, or, you know.
It's almost like he's getting punished, and then they're going to make the violation.
Exactly. Like classic case of Alice in Wonderland. I can't remember who said it, but one of the characters in Alice in Wonderland said, first the verdict, then the punishment. And the Red Queen said, no, no, no. First the punishment, then the verdict.
Then the verdict.
Yeah, that's exactly. So I wonder how they get the authority to amend a letter that their president wrote. And then they amended it to state that it was issued over unrefined and undiplomatic emails.
That's exactly, nothing is like that in the letter that Christ sent. Undiplomatic email?
Yeah.
That wasn't a violation.
Well, they want to put that in there.
Yeah.
See, so they're second guessing their own president. President, you should have said undiplomatic emails and unrefined and undiplomatic emails.
Or maybe they just didn't have a favorable opinion of McNitch personally, and this is their way of displaying it.
It's probably a surety war.
Yeah.
Yeah. So once again, can you discipline a public employee who's speaking about a matter of public interest for sending unrefined and undiplomatic emails? What they're acting like here is really like a principal. If you've ever been a high school or junior high teacher, your principal will come around and observe and take notes, and after the observation, you'll have a chat, and the principal will say, you know, Bob, you did okay on that part about the Civil War, but here's a way that you could become a more effective teacher. That's what they do. And that's what these guys think they're doing. They think they're telling McNitch how to be a better professor. This got nothing to do with the First Amendment or freedom of speech. This is telling him...
Or the reprimand.
Or the reprimand, yeah. So the specific violations will be struck from his letter, but it will be amended to state that it was issued over unrefined and undiplomatic emails, and for McNitch's failure to explicitly state that he was not representing the university. The original... All right, let's take the big halftime break here.
Wishing you a happy, healthy, and prosperous new year from your friends at Security Title. As we clean house for the new year, this is an excellent time to make sure the title to your land is also in order. It doesn't matter if you own a ranch in Inarajan, a house in Dedido, or a hotel in Tumon. Keeping the ownership clear promotes peace in the family and can avoid future misunderstandings. When it comes to your family property, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Join us at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and see why they've been crowned Guam's best Chamorro food restaurant for 9 consecutive years. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tinactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet burgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña location from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for lunch, 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. for dinner, or 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. for their famous Sunday brunch.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Debt limit deadline fast approaching. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. But House Republican leaders say they won't just rubber stamp an extension.
House Speaker Kevin McCarthy says he wants to talk with President Biden about spending cuts tied to an increase in the debt limit later this year.
We're 6 months away. Why wouldn't we sit down now and change this behavior.
President Biden says Congress has an obligation to prevent a debt default. Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre adds that must happen without conditions.
We're not going to work our way around this. We're not going to negotiate on this.
The more than $31 trillion debt limit will be reached Thursday, the Treasury Department says, necessitating a suspension of investments in some federal retirement accounts.
Fox's Jared Halpern in Washington. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre says the administration is being as transparent as possible about the classified documents from the Obama administration found at the president's home and think tank office. Many White House reporters would disagree.
Most questions directed at Karine Jean-Pierre went unanswered. Reporters repeatedly referred to the White House counsel's office, which had made an advisor, not a lawyer, available just an hour earlier, referring reporters to the Department of Justice and the president's personal attorneys. Among the unanswered questions, how many documents were found, whether there will be additional searches, and the reason President Biden's personal attorneys, who don't have security clearances, were involved in the search for records from a previous administration.
Fox's Jackie Heinrich at the White House. Police in the Boston suburb of Cohasset, Massachusetts, say they have the evidence to charge Brian Walsh with murder. His wife, Anna, hasn't been seen since New Year's Eve. Police have found blood and a broken knife in the basement of the family's home, but so far no body. Her husband is to be charged with murder and the improper transport of a body in a court appearance on Wednesday. America is listening to Fox News.
Farewell ANZ Bank. You've been an excellent corporate citizen for 30-plus years. And yes, we're competitors, but we're sorry to see you go. Now let us address the bank's customers. Bank Pacific's arms are wide open to accept your banking needs, whether it be to handle your savings, commercial checking, merchant business, or consumer or commercial loan needs. We're open on Saturdays in 4 convenient locations and have excellent online banking services. And we're staying, for as you might know, where others put branches, we place roots. Equal Opportunity Lender, member FDIC.
Join us at Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and see why they've been crowned Guam's best Chamorro food restaurant for 9 consecutive years. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tinactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet burgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mescla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña location from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for lunch, 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. for dinner, or 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. for their famous Sunday brunch.
A shooting at a Martin Luther King Day event in Florida has left a young mother dead.
St. Lucie County Sheriff Ken Mascara said in a video statement that after an MLK Day parade, there was a party at a nearby park. Shots were fired, 8 people were shot, and 4 others were injured as they tried to run. Mascara said Tuesday morning a woman injured in the shooting passed away.
She's a 30-year-old Fort Pierce native who was at the party with her 6-year-old daughter. And now what was a shooting investigation has turned into a murder investigation.
The chief deputy said it appears this shooting was a dispute between 2 rival Fort Pierce gangs. They're asking for public help in locating the suspects. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
In Michigan, a married couple and their son have all been sentenced to life in prison for a murder committed over a face mask.
Back in 2020, security guard Calvin Munnerlin insisted a woman leave a Family Dollar store in Flint, Michigan because she wasn't wearing a face mask. Soon after, that guard was shot to death by 2 men. The Flint Journal says Charmel Teague, her husband Larry Teague, and her son were convicted of first-degree premeditated murder in connection with the death. That conviction carries a sentence of life in prison without parole. That woman without a mask, she's the daughter of Charmel Teague. Surveillance video showed Munnerlin, the guard, arguing with Teague, and it appears she spit on the guard and he tackled her in the parking lot. Jill Nato, Fox News.
California is finally getting a break from a series of storms that's dumped heavy rains and damaged thousands of homes, killing at least 20 people. The state's Office of Emergency Services says the damage is spread across 41 of the state's 58 counties. But calmer weather arrived on Tuesday. President Biden will travel to California on Thursday to view firsthand some of the damage. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
All 3 stations, all 3 morning shows. Thanks to all the listeners for Pika's Best, Choice Broadcasting has swept the top 3 best radio stations. The Point, Boss 104, and Star 101. Top 3 radio personalities, Kyle Mandapat, Ray Gibson, and Daryl Lizama. Put the power of Pika's Best to work for you. If you're an advertiser, call 671-888-7346 for information, rates, and packages. And let us get your message out to Pika's Best listeners with Pika's Best Broadcasters. And thanks for listening to Pika's Best. Attention investors, Century 21 Realty Management is proud to present an investment opportunity you have to look at. Ladera Towers Condominium provides luxury living centrally located in Manila with access to the entire island. Ladera Towers has 3-bedroom condominium units available now. See them before they're all gone. 4-bedroom units sold out. This investment is only going to appreciate in value. Call now, Century 21 Realty Management. The number is 647-5003 or visit laderatowerguam.com or guamproperties.com.
Wishing you a happy, healthy, and prosperous new year from your friends at Security Title. As we clean house for the new year, this is an excellent time to make sure the title to your land is also in order. It doesn't matter if you own a ranch in Inarajan, a house in Dededo, or a hotel in Tumon. Keeping the ownership clear promotes peace in the family and can avoid future misunderstandings. When it comes to your family property, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Okay, so here we are at the end of the big halftime show and the traditional airing of the Tall Tales Rogues Gallery. And Jose, once again, will remind you how you too could be on the Tailgaters Rogues Gallery.
It's this simple, Bob. Point your browser to thepoint.gu. That's thepoint.gu, the official website of this radio station. Look for the I'm a Tailgater t-shirt wearing a beard, and click on that link. It'll take you to Purveyor. Order your shirt. When your shirt arrives, put it on, take a selfie, and send that selfie to the Point's WhatsApp at 671-797-8255. And you, too, can be a part of the Rogues Gallery.
It's just that easy.
That easy, and there will be an update tomorrow.
And how much does it cost to be on the Tall Tales Rogues Gallery, Jose?
I've done all the calculations, and it still adds up to nothing.
Yeah, but it's a great honor.
Yes, sir.
It's a real treat. Okay, entering the second half of Tall Tales here, and I'm still on that part of the card where we're talking about Tom Krice McNinching Ron McNinch. And before the break, I mentioned that the border regents met. According to McNinch, they didn't do much of anything except rule against him. They decided that they were going to amend Krice's letter, a questionable proposition at best, and that so that it states that he was issued a reprimand over unrefined and undiplomatic emails. And they struck several things from Krice's original letter, that he misrepresented UOG by sending an unapproved official press release, that he was rude, insulting, and belligerent toward political candidates, that he violated the Mini-Hatch Act, that he misused university email. McNinch was not allowed to speak during the grievance hearing hosted Tuesday. The board was generally in agreement that McNinch's conduct was unprofessional, according to findings read by Regent Pete Diaz. Okay, let's once again resurfaced the word demurrer. A demurrer is a word that survives the end of common law pleading. And under common law pleading, the plaintiff states a claim or a cause of action against the defendant, and the defendant comes back and enters his demurrer, which means that even if the facts are exactly as you state them, you are not under the law, you are not entitled to relief. Now, let me give you a classic example. I'm walking down the sidewalk next to Soledad Street in Agana, and whereupon I happen upon President Christ. And I see him, I make eye contact, I walk past him, etc. He files a suit in the Superior Court that said yesterday at 2 p.m., with malice aforethought, Robert Klitzkie was walking down the sidewalk on Soledad Street. As I was approaching from the opposite direction, Klitzkie exposed his bare face to me. Therefore, I pray for a judgment of $1 million, prejudgment interest, on and on and on and on. Okay. So he could prove up those facts. But on those facts, is he entitled to judgment? No. If if that were an actual case, he'd be entitled to Article 11 sanctions, and it probably cost him a pretty good chunk of money out of his pocket because it would be frivolous. So that's much of what we have here. The Board of Regents generally are in agreement with McDinch's conduct was unprofessional. So let's say you prove up his conduct being unprofessional. Is that grounds to terminate him? No. These emails are not from someone that I would consider a role model. Now here's Regent Bernadette Valencia.
Who should have remained quiet.
The old saying is it's better to stay silent and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. And this is what Bernadette Valencia said. These emails are not from someone that I would consider a role model, a leader or professional. Certainly not representative of an academic who thinks highly of himself or herself or proud of his or her work. Well, there's no room for him at the university. And that's what I mean. Bernadette, I think, wants to be a grade school principal also. Ron, you've got to do better if you want to be recognized as a professional. McNinch, after the hearing, said the reprimand and how UOG handles speech issues for faculty are not settled for him. He can still appeal the matter to a board of professors within the university. That's a nice wobble. I think that a university committee of faculty members and others should review this. I don't think it's healthy for the regents to be reviewing these kinds of issues because they're at the top of the organization. And if you're going to really have opinions that matter has to be developed within the faculty and administrators and staff. McNinch said, McNinch, a little advice to you. You got an issue. Quit screwing around with all these side issues. Your issue is First Amendment, freedom of speech. Nobody can take that away from you, whether it's a group of faculty members, the regents, the principal of the school, it doesn't matter.
This is constructive criticism with a bit of humor, Ron McNitch. I know you're from Georgia, but don't bring the Waffle House here.
Is Waffle House started in Georgia?
There's a Waffle House on every exit of every freeway in Georgia.
Yeah.
It's a great place.
I love Waffle House. It's a great place for breakfast, yeah.
But not for this.
No. Well, he's from Georgia, so we could recognize him as the Georgia Peach.
There you go.
Yeah, and the original Georgia Peach, Ty Cobb, was not known for good manners on the base paths. He had the ability to slide in second base with both his feet about 6 inches off the ground so that a second baseman who wanted to tag him would be caught in Ty's spikes, and plenty of second basemen had to get out the Band-Aids after Ty slid into second base. So where's the Georgia peach here, Ron? Quote, his tone in the emails could have been interpreted in a number of ways, unlike in regular conversation, McNinch said, adding that UOG's rules and regulations were all over the place. Well, it's not a matter of how you interpret emails. It's a matter of whether or not they're protected by the First Amendment. Christ told the newspaper he would not comment on the specifics of the decision, as it was UOG policy not to comment on personnel issues. While McNinch had waived all privacy rights, it was still a matter of policy, Christ said. The university has very strong policies defending academic freedom. Well, that's an eye-opener. And you know, our university policy manual is very good about that. Our university faculty agreement is also very explicit about that, Christ said. When asked whether he stood by what he had done, Christ responded, absolutely yes. Okay, and then we look at the KUAM workup of it. Bernie Valencia, once again, her quote makes it. And then we have another quote here. An ego was harmed or hurt upon learning of the risk that one candidate wouldn't attend the debate, she said. She added McNinch could have used this as an opportunity to show the students how to cope with rejection along with tact and respect. You could be a better teacher, Ron, if you'd only listen to me. We'll tell you how to be a better teacher. Forget all this First Amendment stuff. That's not important.
But what about the letter Chris wrote?
Well, we changed that for you. The board ultimately decided to make changes to the president's decision, but didn't change the punishment. McNinch told KUM he plans to appeal. So a really sad story coming out of the university. And Ron, it gives you a great opportunity and, at least in my eyes, a great deal of responsibility. Because this is more important than Bernie Valencia telling you how to be a better constructor or another region telling you how to handle disappointment.
Or how to tie your tie.
Yeah. And you see, once again, the case law, I think it's Hortonville versus Hortonville Federation of Teachers that holds that a public employee who is disciplined is not entitled to an impartial fact finder, that the board can do it. However, the board has to have some advice as to what it's doing when it's doing this. And I don't know enough. I'm not going to spend the time getting up to speed on how the university does its business. But, you know, if you just say, okay, a board meeting next week to hear Ron McNinch's appeal, and there are no procedures in place, then it's ipso facto a facial denial of due process. Because if you're going to punish somebody, he has to know how the punishment structure works. So, Ron, stick with that. First Amendment, violated your First Amendment, and under the First Amendment, you can be obnoxious, you can be critical. That's why we have a First Amendment. Not so that everybody has to tiptoe around and have members of the regents on speed dial to give them hints on how to be more effective professors. Stick with it, Ron. Okay. Now, next we go to Chris Duenas versus the governor. almost time for Churchill Downs.
About 10 minutes before Wrigley.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. Wrigley, not Churchill. Okay, this is Chris Duenas versus the governor, and this is a new Guam bill seeks to rein in governor's emergency powers. I picked this up in Pacific Island Times. In yet another attempt to clip the governor of Guam's emergency powers, Senator Chris Duenas today introduced a bill that would authorize the legislature to terminate a public health emergency declaration. Bill 7-37 would empower the senators to end a governor-declared public health emergency status with a majority vote. Duenas introduced 737 after the 36th legislature failed to override Lulian Guerrero's veto of Bill 1136, which would have required legislative approval prior to the extension of a public health emergency. The governor has finally ended the COVID-related public health emergency, which was first declared on March 15, 2020, and constantly extended each month until it was lifted January 6. In the same executive order that lifted the public health emergency, the governor declared Guam under a state of emergency due to food insecurity experienced by our people, as a result of the pandemic. This emergency is declared for limited purposes of administrating the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, emergency allotments, etc. She said the emergency declaration will continue until national public health emergency related to the pandemic terminates or until such time as the benefit period for state emergency allotment ends, whichever occurs first. Now, people were talking about doing this a long time ago. And the governor's answer was, I can't end the state of emergency because we'll lose these federal benefits. So who just impeached the governor's credibility?
The governor.
The governor. Emergency allotments, are what used to be known as food stamps, have been in place for 2 years. Under the federal government's new spending plan, the SNAP emergency allotments are due to expire at the end of February. These public health emergencies could have ended long ago, and other measures could have been put in place to aid our people in recovery, Duenas said. I want to thank Governor Lulian Guerrero for acknowledging that public health emergency can end without risking SNAP benefits and other emergency necessities, which he's been saying since the get-go.
These aren't new measures.
Yes. The governor's first executive order of her second term clearly demonstrates these issues could have been addressed individually, Duenas said. This is the same action other states have taken a year ago when we first sought to end the declaration, and why Bill 1136 was so important and why this newly enhanced bill is still necessary, the Republican senator said. He noted that current COVID statistics were almost similar to the number reported by the governor prior to lifting the public health emergency. On January 9, the Department of Public Health and Social Services reported 224 new cases, 9 hospital admissions, and 3 deaths during the first week of the month. When Wuhan virus first entered our island, our streets and our people went silent, and once the numbers were announced at 3 digits, our residents stayed indoors. So I asked the governor, what was different then? Our people deserve an answer. The businesses that had to shut down due to a lack of operations deserve an answer. The families who made the tough decision to relocate due to a failing economy deserve an answer. The individuals who found comfort in alcohol and drug abuse during forced isolation deserve an answer. The host of Tall Tales deserves an answer. We all deserve an answer, Governor.
And what's crazy is that there's revelation after revelation coming out of the media, not by people who've been saying the same thing since 2020, but the people who have been hucksters of this propaganda going, well, maybe we should pull back a little bit.
Yeah.
That Dr. Wen, in her op-ed in the Washington Post, that says maybe our numbers claiming COVID-19 are a bit inflated.
Yeah.
And then she shows a graph that shows they're grossly inflated.
Yeah. And of course, we can never forget the poet laureate of Tall Tales, Andrew Camacho's example, which I'll repeat. Maybe some of the newcomers haven't heard it.
Not just poet laureate, prophet.
Say again?
Not just poet laureate, he's the prophet.
A poet laureate and a prophet, yeah. So Andrew hypothesized this scenario. A man was so depressed by this whole Wuhan virus pandemic that he took a fatal dose of poison. But just to make sure that he wouldn't, his life wouldn't continue, he went to Two Lovers Point and he jumped off Two Lovers Point. When he hit the water, a shark came along and almost completely devoured him. The only thing left of the poor guy was his nose. Fire department rescue folks jumped in the water and were able to recover the nose. They took the nose to the hospital. A swab was taken of the nose, and the pronouncement was made, this man died of Wuhan virus, COVID-19, because he tested positive for the virus.
Couldn't be farther from the truth.
Exactly.
Or closer to the truth.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So I've got Chris's bill here, and Chris really kind of spells it out. In the legislative findings, he repeats large sections of constitutional law. The legislature finds that the organic rights of citizens of Guam include, and I'll just kind of skim through it, no law shall be enacted respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free access thereof, abridging the freedom of speech or the press or the people to peaceably assemble and petition the government. And next item, no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, and private property shall not be taken for public use without compensation. Now, these are all things that happen under the governor's emergency powers. Statutorily, the 48 U.S.C. statutorily incorporates the First through Ninth Amendments of the Constitution, which include the First and Second Amendments. And he goes on to say, under 48 U.S.C. Section 1423, legislature has the sole authority to create law. Courts throughout the United States have held that criminal acts can be created exclusively by enactment of law and not administratively or through an executive order. Legislature further finds that the Supreme Court, in the case of Roman Catholic Diocese of Brooklyn, New York, versus Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York, granted requests from the Roman Catholic Diocese of Brooklyn and two Orthodox Jewish synagogues to block enforcement of a New York executive order restricting attendance at houses of worship. Both the diocese and synagogues claimed that the executive order violated the right to free exercise of religion, etc. And we had that right here. You remember the archdiocese tried to cooperate as much as possible with the director of public health. And Paul Goffigan, who was the head of the, what committee at the archdiocese?
Liturgical committee.
The liturgical committee wrote a letter to the director of public health and social service, Linda Nursi, saying, this is what we do. We mask, we keep the distance, on, and we do all of these things. But it's very important to us as Catholics that we are able to practice our sacraments. She wrote back and said, nice try, but you do not have permission to practice your sacraments. Prima facie, free, the end of free exercise. She can enforce health regulations, but she can't tell people, she can't tell religious folks you can't practice your sacraments. And what did the governor do about this? It's not what the governor did, Jose. Yeah, it's what the governor didn't do. She didn't step in. And, however, Linda DeNorsi was gone shortly after that. Once again, there may have been a horse's head at the bottom of her bed because there was a little bit of a spat about who signed emergency declarations. Chris's bill goes on to say, as it was the intent of the framers of the Bill of Rights to limit powers of government over the people, it's also the intent of the legislature to reaffirm such fundamental rights of Guam's residents during public health emergencies. The first 9 amendments to the Constitution that are guaranteed to the people of Guam by 48 U.S.C. Section 1421BU were never intended for government to grant or withhold rights and privileges to be governed. Instead, these and other amendments to the Constitution are strict limitations and prescriptions on governmental power. Such rights are often referred to as negative rights, that instead of granting individual rights to its citizens, it prevents government from taking away specified privileges, immunities, freedoms, and protections from the citizens of this country. Sounds like a tailgaters wrote this one, huh? It's the intent of the legislature to reaffirm that such fundamental rights on Guam continue to exist during declared public health emergencies. And then Section 2 gets down to what the statute's amending. And he's amending Section 19406 of Title 10 to read like this. No executive order, agency directive, etc., issued or promulgated pursuant to the declaration of a state of public health emergency, etc., shall, A, prohibit freedom of assembly in or on one's residential property, B, prohibit the free exercise of religion, C, diminish or suspend a person's Second Amendment constitutional rights as specified in Chapter 60 of Title 10, deprive any person of liberty without due process of law, permit the confiscation or seizure of any lawfully owned property without due process and just compensation. F, create or have the effect to create criminal acts or define or expand the scope of criminal acts or civil violations that are defined by public law. G, impose excessive fines or deny access to public information as required by the Freedom of Information Act. So Chris is amending the territorial emergency statute to basically incorporate the Constitution therein. You wouldn't think that it would have been necessary, but our experience shows otherwise, doesn't it? Let's head for Wrigley Field for the 7th inning stretch.
Join us at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and see why they've been crowned Guam's best Chamorro food restaurant for 9 consecutive years. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tenactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet burgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagatnya location from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for lunch, 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. for dinner, or 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. for their famous Sunday brunch.
Every company needs money to grow and take on the challenges 2023 will bring.
That's why Bank Pacific's commercial loan officers stand ready to help you.
We offer several programs tailored to assist companies to get to the next step or perhaps for a startup,
including working with SBA or GITA.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches.
Bank Pacific.
We want to be your partner.
Equal opportunity lender. Member FDIC.
Credit conditions apply.
Okay, so here we are back again with Chris Drainus' Bill 7. The next section that I'm going to talk about deals with unlawfully seizing a person's medical supplies or appliances. And then the bill goes into how a termination of a public health emergency occurs. And Chris changed it so that now it shall be terminated automatically after 30 days unless renewed by the legislature under the same standards and procedures set forth in this article. Any such renewal shall also be terminated automatically after 30 days unless renewed by the legislature under the same standards, etc. So the governor declares it, and then she got to go over to the legislature and sell it. I need it for 30 more days, which seems, it just, I don't use the word common sense very often, but it's clearly an example of common sense.
Well, aligned with our Constitution and our government structure.
Exactly. And then the next section says that a resolution of a majority of the members of the legislature may terminate in part or in whole a declaration of a state of emergency at any time upon finding that the occurrence of an illness or health condition does not or no longer proposes a high probability, etc. And any request, attempt, or renewal of such termination or partial termination shall be of no force or effect. So the legislature, a majority of the members of the legislature could just stop it midstream, right? And then some misdemeanor penalties were downgraded to $25 civil violations. So a really nice piece of legislation. I might make only one suggestion, but I notice I've got somebody in the green room. I wouldn't be surprised if it is not, it's R. Keith. I thought it might be Chris Duenas. Go ahead, R. Keith.
Good afternoon, Bob. I got a pretty simple question, I think. If these violations of civil rights are so very obvious or apparent, why can there not be either criminal or civil case against the governor?
Well, of course there can.
Or why hasn't there been?
Yeah, because no one files suit, R. Keith. The judiciary, the judiciary is like a great big toad. It just sits there and looks smart until someone comes along and pokes it with a stick. And then
Wasn't there one case somebody did try to bring a case? I think he owned a bar.
Yeah.
And I forgot the reason why they shot it down.
Yeah.
It didn't even go to court.
A guy with a German name.
Yeah, it was dismissed.
Yeah, it was dismissed. Yeah. And then Ken tried to, I think, bring a suit on the checkpoints. So the reason that the guy that owned the bar had a very German type name, started with a P, I think.
Oh, he was the owner of McCrout's.
No, I don't think so. It was down in it was down in Tumum.
Yeah, oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah, and his problem was that he had a difficult time pleading damages, connecting damages to the actions of the governor. The civil rights cases, it's more complicated than just saying, well, that's a violation of civil rights. So he wasn't able to prevail, and I don't remember why the checkpoint suit didn't go anywhere. But in order to prevail on a civil rights case, you got to have good lawyers who will take the case and on a contingency fee basis. And of course, it's difficult to sue the government of Guam. You have to sue an individual and show that the individual was acting under color of law, but in the process denied a person his civil rights. So, one of the defenses would be, I wasn't acting under color of law. I was acting lawfully because this is what the law tells me to do. So that's a complicated answer, R. Keith, but the real reason here is that we don't have enough lawyers on this island. If something like this had happened in California, there probably would literally be 50 civil rights suits pending right now. But because we are somewhat underlawyered, lawyers in Guam are not that hungry to take contingency fee-based cases that on their face appear to be at least partially long shots.
Pinehoff.
Pinehoff,
yeah. And he sued that he wasn't afforded due process when his bar was closed, his business was closed, and it was dismissed.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you can see, procedural due process. What procedural due process was he entitled to? Probably not much. And then we go back to that 1905 case that dealt with pandemics and the government's almost plenary police powers to deal with pandemics. So, Pinehoff, yeah. That's the way it goes, Keith.
Just curious. So there would not be any criminal actions associated with such.
Well, we kind of wonder about the 19th floor, don't we? Yeah. So when the governor sends her son-in-law, her consigliere, to cut a deal with a hotel when the son-in-law didn't have any authority to do that, and he cuts a multi-million-dollar deal with the hotel, which has a note with the governor's family bank, and the note is in default, and the mortgage is being foreclosed, and the son-in-law cuts a deal with that hotel. At least there's a little bit of smoke emanating from that pile, and the old saying is, well, if there's smoke, there's fire. But our attorney general took dynamic action on that. Remember, he filed for declaratory relief and sued 4 government contracts. He never touched that matter with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah. Good riddance to bad trash.
True enough, Keith.
Okay, well, thank you for answering my question.
Okay, always good to talk to you, Keith. So we're going to be heading for Churchill Downs in a minute, but I've got Senator Duenas here. Senator Duenas, meet me outside Churchill Downs because I want to give you enough time here to go forward with your bill.
Every company needs money to grow and take on the challenges 2023 will bring.
That's why Bank Pacific's commercial loan officers stand ready to help you.
We offer several programs tailored to assist companies to get to the next step or perhaps for a startup,
including working with SBA or GITA.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches.
Bank Pacific.
We want to be your partner.
Equal opportunity lender. Member FDIC.
Credit conditions apply.
Join us at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and see why they've been crowned Guam's best Chamorro food restaurant for 9 consecutive years. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tinactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet burgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagatna location from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for lunch, 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. for dinner, or 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. for their famous Sunday brunch.
Okay, so here we are at Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky. 6 furlongs, and I cross the finish line, finish another exciting, elucidating, educational episode of Tall Tales. And as I stumble out the exit of Churchill Downs, who do I run into? None other than Chris Duenas. Afternoon, Chris.
Half a day, Your Honor, Honorable Marine, Honorable Senator, my favorite talk show host. First of all, with our Keith, and the case of Thomas Pinehoff, I actually was really surprised that was thrown out, at least without a hearing on the merits, because I think he and many others were demonstrably harmed when restaurants with full bars were operating, and there's even research that now bears out that the potential spread of Wuhan virus in those settings was actually more by all of the utensils and plates and things that are handled in a restaurant. But those restaurants were allowed to operate their full bars, while bars that were basically bars and probably only serve, the sides of food, if anything else, not full meals, I believe were actually discriminated against. And, like every other business and every other discussion we've had, everyone was willing to tighten up and abide by protocols, but just to have the ability to continue to run their business and have that freedom, especially after a time certain. And even with the churches, Your Honor, I mean, the church, if they had to, could have, could increase and double their masses, just to make sure that everybody who wants to worship could go worship and continue to follow protocols. But obviously, there was just a hammer that was put down that said, basically you have no say. This bill intends to end the era that was ushered in by our governor of basically you have no say.
Well, the problem that Pinehoff ran into was the Jacobson versus Massachusetts case in 1905, which in broad letters say that the police powers of the state can be used in a rather dictatorial fashion to deal with a public health emergency. And that's still pretty much the state of the law, so it's hard for anybody to recover.
I understand, but I still think that this kind of action and activity, and one of the main reasons why I restated in the bill, of course, our known rights is that in this instance you cannot overstate, simply because I believe, and I really believe this, that our actions by the Guam Freedom Coalition, yourself, Ray, and really the individuals that really pushed back once we saw a clear way that this was becoming a manageable issue and virus, and we started to see through why the extensions were happening, I think saved a lot of businesses. It would have killed a lot more if they weren't able to at least trickle back, and crawl back into business and try to survive, and make their way. And that's the whole purpose of exercising your freedom of speech and your ability to go out there and protest against your government when you believe that they're acting improperly. And this bill, once again, is trying to ensure that that's exactly what we have, is the people's voice at the people's house heard upon any attempt to continue the state of public health emergency. And the other factor of kind of adding to the resolution, the resolution you prepared, Your Honor, is really that ability to also do in part, because when this bill becomes law, and I'm praying it does, even under that circumstance where you're going to do it by your resolution is going to be under the circumstances which will allow to take into account those prevailing factors that will be made under the presentation of the public hearing and the requirement of the administration to come down and make their case.
Yeah, Chris, when I went through it, there's one thing that you might think about adding.
Okay.
And that is that the emergencies have to be renewed by the legislature. However, the legislature could terminate an emergency 2 days after it's put in place upon a finding that there's no longer a public health emergency.
Okay.
You might consider language along the lines of that the legislature could terminate the emergency if it finds that the governor has abused her powers pursuant to the declaration.
Okay. I will draft that, sir.
Just a thought.
Sure. And, thank you for your help on this, really, and thank you for continuing to keep this issue out there, because I think that, we've really been, the fight in this situation has really been, very worthwhile, and exactly the Fundamental Vigilance Committee, I thank Lee Weber and everybody who has taken and played a role, yourself and The Point and Ray, because, I'll tell you, and I know you know this, I mean, I took a really, really heavy beating early on when I introduced this bill. And I think it was still kind of very, the fear factor was so intense still in the beginning, and I'm glad I stuck with it and pushing for override so that I can continue to educate the public that didn't understand what we were trying to do here. But, in the beginning, I tell you, a lot of folks that are very close to me and in the medical community and others were very, kind of really upset with me in the beginning, not understanding what I was trying to do. But, it's amazing because those people now really have saw the wisdom in what this is all about as time has played out. And, they started to see basically the overuse and abuse and potential abuses that had taken place, some of which, could be, result in pending litigation going forward, depending on the findings. But it really took a lot of fortitude to hang on because, the timing was such that there was still, the overwhelming amount of fear that was placed in our community I think absolutely as a deliberate method to kind of shield what was really going on was very powerful.
Well, at least they didn't McNinch you, Chris.
You know what, Senator? I guess that's the best part of it. If you really want your voice to be heard, work really hard and become a senator because they can't McNinch you when you're a senator.
Yeah.
The
Right.
people of Guam have put their confidence in you, and if they don't reelect you, then you've been you haven't been McNinched, you've been retired. But,
Yeah. Well, I have a copy of John F. Kennedy's book called Profiles in Courage that I read a long, long time ago, back when I was young and idealistic. But I'm going to take it out to the Board of Regents and ask them to have a meeting and then write a chapter in the book called The Courage of Chris Duenas and Bill 11, because I think that's where you belong, Chris.
I appreciate that. That's high praise coming from you. And I know that when we drafted that, I know that the particular area in terms of our ability to worship strikes very close to home for you and for many of us of faith as well as Jose. So we'll watch this going through, the process, and I hope they don't schedule it between 4 and 6 because that's prime time for the people of Guam, and I'll try to make sure that the committee doesn't, because I'd like to have you come down and testify on this bill.
I'll do it, Chris. I'll be there with bells on.
All right. Thanks a lot, Your Honor, and look forward to the balance of the show.
See you later. Chris Duenas, the author of Bill number 7. And I know that, in the beginning, Chris Duenas is putting our lives in danger, and why doesn't he back off? And then, of course, the fart took out after Chris.
Everywhere. They permeated the internet.
Yeah. Okay, next item on the card is double pay versus you. Now, when I'm talking about double pay, I'm not talking about the scam dealing with what the media calls original owners or ancestral owners. Land that was taken by the United States government pursuant to eminent domain. The United States government paid for the land twice. And now our governor is saying, yeah, well, if we can't get the national government to return that land to you that they've paid you for twice, then we'll get the taxpayers to give you a chunk of money, which is a classic example of a particular kind of identity politics.
Well, we have an affinity for double dipping here on Guam.
We do. Now, the double pay I'm talking about now is the double pay that some government employees said that they were entitled to because during the territorial emergency in the beginning, when everybody else got to stay home and got paid, they actually had to go to work. That would be 13th Amendment, wouldn't it? The 13th Amendment to the Constitution.
How dare you make us work?
Yeah. So this is a article that ran on KUAM. Lawsuit by GovGuam staffers seeking double pay during pandemic dismissed without prejudice. A large group of GovGuam employees that was seeking double pay for work during the early days of the public health emergency will not be getting the additional money, at least for now. Their class action suit was dismissed without prejudice by a Superior Court judge, which means it's still alive legally. Well, I don't know what you mean by alive legally. When a case is dismissed without prejudice, it can be dismissed with leave to amend. Ordinarily, when a complaint is dismissed, the plaintiff gets one crack at amending it to see if he can pull it back in past the demurrable state. But if it's just dismissed without leave to amend, that means another suit arising from the same nucleus of operative facts would lie. Attorney Josh Walsh represents a group of several hundred line agency workers who are seeking the same double pay that autonomous agency workers got, and he told KUAM, you have these government workers showing up for work when their agencies were closed, but they're still showing up, nurses, cops, firefighters. And the same way they do that with 150-mile-an-hour winds outside in a typhoon or in a hazardous wartime situation or something like that got declared. They went to work on the promises of their regulations that they would get paid this way. No, I think they went to work because if they didn't, they would have gotten fired. And if you follow this whole issue, this is not extra pay for exposure to danger. That's not what it's all about. If you were a ribbon clerk at the General Services Administration down in Petey, and you were told to come in, you would still get, and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. You still got to do it. That's not what it was about. It was as I characterize it, a warped sense of barnyard equity. That if some employees get paid for not working, everyone should get paid for not working. And then those who work should also get paid for working. So you got non-working pay and working pay. Comes up to double pay, which, when you start any pay system based on giving money to someone who doesn't work, you're going to wind up with a cockeyed result. But Adelup, the Attorney General and line agency, saw otherwise, triggering the lawsuit heard by Judge Elise Iriarte, who found that in this case, the government can't be sued. The judge didn't say the regulations don't need to be read the way they should be read. The judge did not say the workers shouldn't be paid. What the judge said was on Guam, there are different views of it. You can't sue the king, the sovereign, without the sovereign's permission. Instead, he says the judge wanted plaintiff to exhaust administrative challenges, which is a fundamental principle of administrative law. First, you exhaust your administrative remedies, then you go to court. Going down the sovereign immunity administrative review rabbit hole for this CSC is a waste of time, Walsh said. There's no doubt the way our previous Attorney General Levin what his perspective was and about whether the money was owed. It's not in his view. There was no doubt about the governor's perspective. They're not owed. That was her view. So what's next? Our class members want action, and so going down a years-long journey with Guam Supreme Court to get an answer to bring us back to this might be a path. I got to say goodbye to our president. We'll come back to this tomorrow. And let's go, Brandon.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Still deferring. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre not answering most of the questions about the discovery of classified documents at the president's home and the office of a think tank that bears his name. But one of the president's lawyers has issued a statement about the search for documents.
Richard Sauber, brought on last spring to deal with a range of expected GOP congressional investigations, claims attorneys were sent last Wednesday to the president's Delaware home. He said in a statement, the president's personal attorneys conducting the searches do not have active security clearances. So if they identified a document with a classified marking, they stopped and did not review it. Additional classified material was then found Thursday at the Biden home, which Sauber, who does have a security clearance, personally turned over to Justice Department officials accompanying him.
Fox's David Spunt reports the Wall Street Journal says the Justice Department considered sending FBI agents to the president's home to monitor that search for documents, but decided against it. The country is expected to reach its debt limit tomorrow. The White House wants Congress to increase it or suspend it without condition.
Congressional Republicans are threatening to hold the nation's full faith and credit, a mandate of the Constitution, hostage to their demands.
White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, but House Speaker Kevin McCarthy says he wants to talk with the president about including cuts in federal spending.
And we know where we're sitting at, almost $32 trillion in debt. How could you do this to a future generation that in anything we do, why wouldn't we sit down and talk, and especially with something as serious as debt?
A court hearing is scheduled in Quincy, Massachusetts today. Brian Walsh will be charged with the murder of his missing wife, Anna. She's not been seen since New Year's Eve. Prosecutors say they will share at the hearing some of the evidence they've collected against him. America is listening to Fox News.
Stay on top of the latest forecast with America's Weather Team in the palm of your hands.
Here's the latest from America's Weather Center.
It's Fox weather updates throughout your busy day, every day.
5 inches of rain by tomorrow.
Temperatures being 30 degrees above average.
Put the power of over 100 meteorologists and the worldwide resources of Fox in your hands with the Fox Weather Podcast. Precise, personal, powerful. Subscribe and listen now at foxnewspodcasts.com. Connect to Fox News Audio on the Fox News app. Listen to hear your favorite hosts like Brian Kilmeade, Jimmy Fallon, and Guy Benson standing up for what's right, live and via podcast. Just click listen, then swipe right and hear the latest news updates on your time. And scroll down to hear the latest podcasts from Fox News. And it's even easier to listen in the car with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Get programming alerts and notifications. Fox News Audio is on the Fox News app. The voices America trusts. Download it now.
Some government nutritional benefits increased during the pandemic are about to be rolled back a few weeks from now.
Monthly emergency payments that extended the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, since March of 2020 will be cut starting this March, when recipients will go back to the regular monthly SNAP payments and expected to lose an average of $90 per person per month. That after Congress ended the COVID-related benefit in the government spending bill that President Biden signed into law in December. Several other states have already ended the increased benefits, and SNAP households are now being urged to use the last month of aid to stock up on non-perishable foods. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
It'll be a tough day for thousands of tech workers. The Wall Street Journal reports Microsoft plans to start another round of layoffs as early as today. They could total as much as 5% of the company's workforce, or about 11,000 jobs, according to Sky News. This as Amazon begins cutting 18,000 jobs today amid concerns about inflation and world economic growth. SpaceX is planning to launch a new GPS satellite just over 4 hours from now.
SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket launching the Space Force's 6th third-generation navigation satellite into orbit from Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral in Florida. The satellite for the Space Force's Global Positioning System, built by Lockheed Martin, named Amelia Earhart after the trailblazing aviator. The Falcon 9's first stage booster will return to Earth and land on a drone ship in the Atlantic Ocean. Reps for Space Systems Command saying in a statement, the launch marks the 25th military code satellite introduced to our constellation, providing our satellite operators with highly capable and advanced technology to aid them in their mission. Kristen Goodwin, Fox
In
News.
tennis, defending champ Rafael Nadal has lost his second-round match in the Australian Open to Mackenzie McDonald. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Have a day and a happy new year from KFC. And me, I'm Colonel Sanders. And to kick off the new year, I'm bringing back one of my best deals, the $25 fill-up bucket. That's 10 pieces of original recipe drumsticks and thighs with 2 large sides of red rice for only $25. It's the highest caliber meal for you to spend less money. KFC's $25 fill-up bucket is available at all KFC restaurants island-wide and here for a limited time. KFC, it's finger-licking good.
If you love them enough to listen to them practice the same song on tuba,
please be done.
Over and over and over and over and over, then surely you'll check nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure they're correctly buckled in the back seat.
Sounds good, honey.
Check today at nhtsa.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Well, we're coming to your city. Gonna play our guitars and sing you a country song. We'll all be flying higher than a jetliner. And if you want a little bang in your yin yang, come along.
Just because someone may have driven a gasoline car, science evolves and gives us new knowledge with time.
What they've clearly decided to do is to not say much, right? They've said a minimal amount because they're trying to not anger the Justice Department. But those options are crappy.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Valen. Happy birthday to you.
Freedom is back in style. Welcome to the revolution.
Yeah, we're coming to your city. Gonna play our guitars and sing you a country song.
Sean Hannity. The new Sean Hannity Show. More behind-the-scenes information on breaking news and more bold, inspired solutions for America.
All right, hour 2, Sean Hannity Show. Thank you for being with us. Toll free, it's 800-941-SEAN if you want to be a part of the program. You might recall that there were 2 people that then Kevin McCarthy, minority leader, put up to be on the Jan 6 committee. One was Jim Jordan of Ohio. The other was Jim Banks of Indiana. And Nancy Pelosi would not hear of it. So then at that point, Kevin McCarthy said, what's the point if you're not going to let our people on the committee? Anyway, with that said, we're going to be joined in a second by Jim Banks of Indiana. And regarding his announcement, I'll let him make it himself if you haven't heard about it yet. He wrote an op-ed out this weekend, tackling the woke as a joke agenda. And he says rightly that it's paralyzing the success of this once great country. Let me read to you a little bit about what he said. He said, we no longer live in a normal America. The issues that Congress used to take up, like health care, the economy, or our withdrawal from Afghanistan, are regrettably pale in comparison to the creeping tyranny which nearly all Americans now feel. Our nation's most powerful forces, our intelligence agencies, corporations, the press, our universities, even our military, are all pressing further and further into uncharted territory, which it's not clear America can return. And for the time being, saving America rests in the House of Representatives. He said the most toxic part of this tyranny is its doctrine, wokeness. Everyone has by now heard this word, but it means something very specific. It means that all the so-called oppressor groups must be punished for their past and present alleged sins, and there are many steps to punishing them, inducing self-hatred through indoctrination, stripping away their rights by not enforcing the laws on their behalf, public humiliation, hatred, and ultimately possibly violence. That's why the left has done so far. It's not exactly clear how far they may go. And what does wokeness mean for the so-called oppressed? Well, it means privileged status, exemption from certain laws and norms, and the public recognition that their views are unimpeachable. They cannot be contradicted by reason. They can't be doubted. They must be believed. Anyway, Congressman Jim Banks of Indiana joins us now. Sir, how are you? Glad you called.
Hey, Sean, good to be with you.
What's going on, sir?
Well,
you have a little bit of an announcement to make. I know what it is, but it's interesting.
I do. Thank you, Sean. I'm in Indiana today, back in God's country. I've kicked off my campaign for the United States Senate. I believe that the Senate needs a shakeup. It needs a new generation of conservative fighters. And I've been in the House. I've been on the front lines of the fights in the House these past